Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mary Savage Dunham. I'm the Director of Public Works for the City of Port St. Lucie. I would like to thank you all for joining us today. Today is the first of two public workshops we're going to have today regarding our public building impact fees. We're going to be doing this again tonight at 6 o'clock. So when this is all over today, if there's anyone that you know that you thought should have been here or might like to hear the presentation, please tell them that we'll be doing the same thing again at 6 p.m. this evening. And then after tonight, we'll be putting the recording on our webpage, of course. So anyone who can't attend today can always look back and see the reports, the PowerPoints, and the videos. So today's format, we're going to have our consultant, Ben Griffin, come up and provide a brief presentation to you. He's going to detail the study and analysis that he undertook. And then after the presentation is over, we're going to open it up to public comment. When we get to that time and we're entertaining public questions, we would just ask that you use the microphone in the back of the room and please provide your name and your company affiliation or address prior to asking your question. And then we will respond to everything that you have for us. And with that, I would again thank you, and I'd like to turn it over to Ben.
Good afternoon. So today we're going to talk about the draft public buildings impact fees. I'll give you, a quick impact fee 101 for those of you who aren't dealing with impact fees every day. It's nice to just have a refresher. Look at the project timeline, the land use assumptions, the level of service analysis, and then onto the proposed fees. So impact fees are one-time payments for growth-related infrastructure. Generally, they're collected with the building permit, but this is new development paying for their proportionate share of new capacity. So we're not using this for operations, maintenance, repair, replacement, rehab. Anything like that. This, we're looking at new infrastructure that serves, future development. This isn't a tax, but it does bind the city to provide the improvements that are in the impact fee study. And level of service is really important with any impact fee study because you can't charge future development for a higher level of service than existing development receives unless there's some outside funding source. And so, as we get into the level of service analysis, I'll point out a couple areas where we are using outside funding to increase that level of service, but you still have to make sure that you're not charging future development for a higher level of service than existing development receives. There are three requirements or three things that we have to prove in an impact fee study. So the first is going to be need. So we need to make sure that we're including system improvements, not project level improvements. So an easy way to talk about this is related to streets, which we're not using today, but widening a road would be a good example of a system level improvement, but turn lanes into or out of a specific development would be an example of a project level improvement. So we want to make sure that anything we're including does provide that citywide benefit. Moving on to benefit, there are two ways that we can prove benefit. So we want to make sure that the city is spending the money in a timely fashion. You can't just sit on this for 20 years. Also, we want to make sure that the fee payer is geographically close enough to receive a benefit from this. Because we're looking at the public buildings, these do provide a citywide benefit, so we have a single benefit area. And then finally, we want to make sure that the fees are proportionate to demand. So you'll see when we look at the fee schedules that there are a few residential options, there are a few non-residential options, and they each have different fees. And that's because we're varying the fees based on the demand generated by that specific type of development. There are three general fee methodologies. They look at points in time. So when we look to the past, that's going to be cost recovery. So essentially here, there's excess capacity, and we're going to have future development buy into that excess capacity. The present would be the incremental expansion methodology. So that's maintaining the existing level of service using today's dollars to come up with a fee to maintain that level of service as the city grows. And then when we look to the future, that's a plan-based approach. Generally, there is a CIP or a master plan that identifies very specific projects, and then we need to allocate the cost of those projects to future versus existing development. We also need to look at credits. So the site-specific credit, probably not applicable with a public buildings fee. You're more likely to see that with a park fee or a street fee where the developer constructs something that's included in the impact fee study, so they get a credit against their impact fees. That's not as likely with the public building impact fees. The other two credits, the debt service credit or a dedicated revenue credit, those are included in the actual impact fee calculation. So those future debt service payments or some sort of dedicated property tax, that reduces the proposed impact fee. So it's offsetting that future revenue generated by future development. All right, so we kicked this off in May. We spent the next couple months looking at the land use assumptions, calculating the impact fees. July, we had staff review. And today we're looking at the public workshops. The tentative schedule right now would be July 28th, having a city council meeting, a workshop with the city council. August 4th would be first reading. August 25th would be second reading. And then if all goes to schedule, then October 1st, the fees would be effective. All right, so we'll move on to the land use assumptions. So we'll start with the residential demand factors. On the residential side, we're using census data for the city of Port St. Lucie, and you can see that a single family unit on average has more occupants than a multifamily unit or a mobile home unit. So if we're allocating costs per person, then a single family unit should pay proportionately more than a multifamily unit or a mobile home unit. So this is how we're making sure that the fees are proportionate to the actual demand. Because we're saying, with public buildings, the residential side, the demand unit is a person. So we're gonna scale those fees up or down based on the number of persons per household. So the left side, this shows the population assumptions. So, since 2020, the city's grown by about 58,000 people at its peak population. And, we're using the comp plan update for these population projections, and they use a hybrid of the Bieber medium and high projections, so it's a medium-high projection. But you can see that, the peak population for 2025, according to, Bieber, is about 269,000 people. And then if we look 20 years out, we're about 380,000 people. So this is what we're using for our population projections. We do have to make some assumptions on, when we convert that to a housing unit. So on the right side, you can see 2021 through 2024 building permit data. So on average, the city is issuing about 4,400 single-family permits per year and almost 700 multifamily permits per year. And if you look at that by a percentage overall, it's about 87% single-family units versus 13% multifamily units. And so we're going to use that split moving forward. So when we convert this population to housing units, the assumption is that 87% of those new units would be single-family versus 13% multifamily. So this shows the population projections and the housing unit projections. Those yellow cells, that's the Bieber or the comp plan population projections every 5 years. And so if we're saying over the next 10 years, about 62,000 additional population, so that's at our peak, then when we convert that to housing units using the ACS data and that housing unit mix from the previous slide, about 23,000 additional housing units. And so that's about 20,000 new single-family units and about 3,000 new multifamily units. And so when you compare that average of, about 2,000 single-family units a year, about 300 multifamily units a year, it's less than, what the city has seen 2021 through 2024. And, if you really look at those population projections, you start to see a slowing of that population growth, each 5-year increment. And so this, also takes that into account. So it's a slowing over time of the number of new housing units. So for non-residential demand, we use the Institute of Transportation Engineers. They provide vehicle trip generation rates and employment density based on national averages. And so that far right corner or that far right column, that's going to be our proxy square footage for our 4 or 5 land uses. When we look at existing development, the most recent estimate on employment data, this is about 46,000 jobs in 2024. And for the existing non-residential floor area, we can take the data that we used in the previous study in 2023 and then add the permits that have been issued since then to come up with about 26 million existing square feet in 2024. So when we look at permit data since 2020, the city's averaging almost 1 million square feet a year on the non-residential side. And, if you look at the bottom, that 2015 to 2020 average, that's what we used in the 2023 study. So that's, about 154,000 square feet a year. It's very conservative because, at the time, we weren't really sure what was going to happen on the, non-residential side. If you look at those yellow highlighted cells, that is, the 5-year average, so what we've seen since 2020, and then that orange is the 10-year average, so 2015 to 2024. And so we're going to use the 5-year average and the 10-year average in combination to project future non-residential development. And so if you squint really hard, you can see these small numbers. But essentially what we're saying is on the industrial side, for the next 5 years, we think the city will grow in a similar fashion as it has over the previous 5 years. Beyond that, years 6 through 10, we're slowing that growth a little, taking that 10-year average just to be more conservative with what we're projecting. We do the same thing with office development. So the first 5 years we take the 2020 to 2024 building permit average and then switch to the 10-year average in years 6 through 10. For commercial and institutional development, the 5-year average hasn't changed much. It's only slightly higher than what we used in the previous study. So we'll use that 2020 to 2024 average for all 10 years on commercial and institutional development. But essentially what it's saying here is, if you grow as projected, so about 7.7 million square feet of non-residential development over the next 10 years, that translates into just shy of 8,000 additional jobs based on those ITE employment density factors. And this, larger numbers that we can actually see. So again, in summary, if we look out over the next 10 years, about 62,000 peak population increase, that translates into about 23,000 new housing units, about 8,000 additional jobs, and that translates into about 7.7 million square feet of non-residential development. All right, so for the public buildings fees, we're not changing much from the current fees adopted in 2023, so we're sticking with a citywide service area. The administrative facilities component, sticking with the incremental methodology, so just maintaining the existing level of service. The public works facilities, also using a plan base like we did in 2023. And the new component is the parking facilities. So the planned garage at City Hall, using a plan based so we can allocate the cost of that to future and existing development equally. And so if we look out 10 years and we maintain our existing level of service, then for administrative facilities, the city needs about 25,000 square feet of additional facilities. One benefit of the incremental methodology is it doesn't lock the city into a specific project, so that can be used to expand an existing facility. It can be used to acquire a new facility. Again, it's very flexible in its approach because it doesn't, put the city on a very specific project. It just provides that flexibility to change with any sort of development. For public works facilities and the parking facilities, we are using a plan base. There's debt involved with those, and so we're allocating the cost of those to all development 30 years out because there's 30-year debt associated with those. And so that public works facilities, those planned public works facilities, about 72,000 square feet, and the parking garage is about 525 spaces. So the actual fee calculation, this shows the administrative facilities component. So the top left, you can see the existing facilities. So about 113,000 square feet exist today, and we're using the City Hall expansion as a proxy for future growth-related administrative facilities costs. And if we allocate this to residential versus non-residential development based on the existing functional population, then 81% of the cost goes to residential development and 19% goes to non-residential development. And so really, on the far right side, that just shows over the next 10 years, if we start at 113,000 square feet today, then 10 years out, if you grow as projected, you'd be about 137,500 square feet, which represents an increase of almost 25,000. And assuming $525 a square foot, which is the City Hall expansion cost, that would generate about $12.9 million in impact fee revenue for additional administrative facilities. Next up, we have the Public Works facilities. So this is a plan-based approach. At the top, this shows the three phases. So phase 1 is 45,000 square feet. Phase 2 is almost 11,000 square feet. And phase 3 is almost 16,000 square feet for a total of about $47 million in planned public works facilities. The idea here is that these planned facilities will replace the existing facilities. And so at the bottom, you see the, Public Works 1, Public Works 2, 3, and then the maintenance garage. And then if you sort of move across to the right, you see what phase replaces that. As I said on the very first slide, you can't use impact fees for replacement. So the planned, 71,500 square feet, if we net out the existing 31,000 square feet, that means impact fees can cover no more than 40,500 square feet. So you'll see in the next slide that we don't get there, but that's just setting it to say, hey, this is the max. Because we're allocating the cost to all development in the final year of debt repayment, we want to make sure that we're not overcharging. And you can see the bottom right, in 2055, so the last year of that 30-year debt payment, we make it to the nearly 72,000 square feet of utilization, and 25,000 of that is growth related. So we still have, the replacement of the 30,000 square feet, and then, the other, 15-ish thousand that existing development is paying. And so you can see in the bottom right where we show the growth-related expenditure of about $16.5 million, and then the existing development share, so the replacement and then the increase to the level of service is just over $30 million for a total of about $47 million. So again, making sure that we're not overcharging future development. And then for parking facilities, this is the planned parking garage at City Hall. We're doing the same thing as we did with the Public Works facilities. We're just spreading the cost of this over all development in the final year of debt repayment. And so you can see in the bottom right, 185 of those 525 spaces are growth related. So about $5.5 million of the $15.8 million is actually growth related. The remaining, $10.2 million is existing development share repaid through debt service. And speaking of debt service, we need to make sure that we include credits. So we want to make sure that we're not, charging future development once through the impact fee and once through those future debt service payments. So this shows the existing debt credit. So in 2020, the city issued debt of about $14.5 million for phase 1 of the Public Works facility. So this just shows that credit. So it takes the annual debt service payment, it divides it by the population or the jobs in that year, and then, it takes the net present value of that. And so essentially what it's saying is those future debt service payments per person, we should be crediting the impact fee about $20 a person, or about $27 per job, so we're not overcharging for existing debt service. We also need to include a credit for future debt. So this includes about $16.5 million for City Hall, an additional $15 million for Public Works facility, and then about $15.8 million for the parking garage. And again, we're just taking that annual debt service payment, allocating it to population or jobs, taking the net present value. And so for the future debt service credit, we need a credit of about $62 per person or about $84 per job. So this shows the current impact fee legislation. This will change. The new impact fee legislation goes into effect January 1st of 26, but under the current legislation, if the impact fee increases up to 25%, we have to phase the fees in over 2 years. If the increase is between 25 and 50%, we have to phase it in over 4 years. Can't exceed a 50% increase, and we can't increase the fees more than once every 4 years unless we use extraordinary circumstances. So what we're showing here, this is the public buildings, or proposed public buildings fees for residential. So you can see that, that the sum of each component cost per person, so essentially $217 a person related to public buildings fees. We multiply that by the number of persons per household. So, for a single family unit, it's 2.84 persons per household. So the maximum fee that we can charge is $615 per single family unit. The current fees are $516. So that represents a 19% increase compared to the current fees. And the statutory limit would be $774. So because we are below that with our proposed fees, or the maximum justifiable fee, then we'll stick with those. And so the single-family fees can be phased in over 2 years. The multifamily and mobile residents, because those exceed 25%, but they're less than 50%, those need to be phased in over the next 4 years. But with this update, we are looking at that maximum justifiable fee instead of the statutory limit. So would not need to use extraordinary circumstances to do the phasing over 2 or 4 years, depending on the type of land use. For non-residential, it's this is sort of the same calculation. You take that cost per job, you multiply it by the jobs per unit. With these, they all represent an increase, and most of them represent an increase of more than 50%. The way that the report is written that will be taken to the first reading, the proposed fee equals the statutory limit, and the statutory limit is actually the 2023 statutory limit. So because in 2023, the non-residential fees increased, they were already on a 4-year phasing plan, and it looks as though we're not going to use extraordinary circumstances to change that phasing right now. So they will continue to phase up to their maximum 4-year phasing through 2027. The residential fees in 2023 decreased compared to where they were. So that's why we can increase those right now without needing to use extraordinary circumstances. So in contrast to the residential fees, the non-residential fees, we're going to stick with the statutory limit and not use the maximum justifiable fee at this time. But the city will look at the parks and law enforcement fees in 2 years anyway, and so they can revisit the non-residential side of the public buildings fees at that point. All right, so that is the final slide, so we'll open this up for questions or comments.
If anybody has a question, you can feel free to walk up to the microphone and ask it, or you can leave it with me in writing on the form. and we will get back to you to address it. If there's no questions, we'll have the red line of the ordinance will be available very shortly for your review on the website. And the first reading is scheduled for, or workshop with City Council is scheduled for, again, July 28th, with the first reading being August 4th, which is the public hearing. Thank you for attending. We'll be doing this again later tonight if you know anyone interested.